as we know, aggregate demand refer to the total demand for final goods and services in an economy. Okay. So basically, Arsh, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So since aggregate demand is measured by total expenditure, what is aggregate demand? Basically, it is the expenditure which is done by the community or which is done by a group of people on goods and services. Because if we are demanding something, so that means we are purchasing something. And if we are purchasing something, that means we are also doing expenses on that goods and services. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So we can, say that aggregate demand is something, or aggregate demand is measured by total expenditure of the community on the goods and services. Therefore, aggregate demand is defined as what? Total amount of money which all sectors. Here, all sectors are household, because we know that in economy there are three sectors: household, just like us people, firms, the producers, and the government. So all these sectors of the economy are ready to spend on purchase of goods and services. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
So basically, the total expenditure which the community intended to incur or purchase of goods and services. So aggregate demand is what? Synonyms with the aggregate expenditure in the economy. And we all know that while calculating national income by expenditure method, we are dealing with the expenses done in the production and done in the we are dealing with the expenses done with done by the people for consuming or for using the goods. Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
basically, and it always, yeah, tell me.
होगी अपलोड या फिर नहीं होगी?
See, because I have already given you the concept. This is something
Yes,
which you
ma'am.
have in your book also. But if you want, I can share this page, or I can, share this page on Google Drive. But this is something which is already given in your books, and in the PPT also I have given you the concept. Now I am explaining this again, because see, the question which come to you in your exams are not only direct questions. There are certain tricky questions also, and for them to and for you to solve them, you have to be very deep knowledge regarding this topic, because this section and this topic, that is MPC, or if you're talking about investment multiplier, if you're talking about aggregate demand supply, it contain a large number of questions in your exam. So that's why you have a very deep knowledge. So you can say that this is a kind of a revision which I'm doing. I'm explaining the same thing, but in a different way. In that, in the PPT, I have given you the graphical concept. Here, I'm giving you more theoretical concept, how the economy works, or how the aggregate demand or supply works. And why aggregate demand? Because I have told you that aggregate demand is equal to consumption plus. So why this is aggregate demand is equal to this? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So here I'm giving you, if you want, I can share this page on your Google Drive. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So yeah, where were we? Well, basically, always remember that the expenditure we are talking about in the aggregate demand is always ex ante. I've given you concept of ex ante and ex post. Ex ante, which is intended, which is planned, and ex post, which is actually happened. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So basically, if we can say that if ex ante expenditure is more than ex post, that is the what has been planned what has been planned expenditure is less is more than the actual expenditure, that we can say that aggregate demand is what? Aggregate demand is falling. because plan इतना किया था, but actual में ये हुआ कुछ और. So we can say that aggregate demand is falling. Okay, so we can say that in simple words, aggregate demand is aggregate demand is total expenditure on consumption and investment. Because if we are talking about demand, like if we are talking about money, so the money is private. If we are talking about private, if we are talking about household, or if we are talking about government, basically they are either consuming or either they are investing it. Or investing in where? Investing in for newer machinery, for
Asset. The assets.
yeah, for creating new assets. Okay, so
Yes,
let's
ma'am.
see the in explanation that how components, what is the component of aggregate demand. So the first one is household or private consumption demand. Second one is private investment demand. Third one is government demand. And the fourth one is net export demand. See, these are the four. If in exam the question is that what are the main component of aggregate demand, you have to write it all the four. That is household consumption demand, that is C. Private investment demand, that is I. Government demand for goods and services, that is G. And net export demand, that is X minus M. But here we are basically in your book, or we can say that in general we discuss about only two sector model, and in that two sector model only household and only household and private investment demand are there. So we have to leave government and we have to leave it export and import. And that's why we can say that in the two sector model, aggregate demand is equal to consumption plus investment. Understood? Ash?
Investment और consumption मेरे को समझ नहीं आया, like इसके बाद फिर से can you just repeat this topic?
Okay, see, as we know that what is aggregate demand, here we have discussed that basically aggregate demand is measured by total expenditure of the community on goods and services. Therefore, aggregate demand is also defined as total amount of money which all sector of the economy are ready to spend on purchase of goods and services. Okay? Understood? यहाँ तक तो समझ आया? So ये तुम्हें समझ आया कि where this C comes from?
Yes, ma'am.
But what about this I? You are, confused about the investment. So basically, if we are talking about if we are talking about money, or if we are talking about aggregate demand, so it is not compulsory that whatever income a person has, they spend all their money on consumption. No. Here, and as we know that there are four components of aggregate demand. Basically, household, the main component of aggregate demand, aggregate expenditure, how the aggregate expenditure is happening. So this C, if we are talking about, is for household. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
This C is for household, the consumption we are doing in purchasing goods and services. This C for that only. And where this I come from? This I is for firms, for producers. Okay? Or private investment. Even if we are investing in creating new assets, or if we are investing in in something, so here this investment or this I come from there only. Here, see that explanation. This refer to planned investment demand refer to ex ante expenditure on the creation of new capital asset like machine, building, raw material by private entrepreneurs. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Because we know that aggregate demand is equal to, we can say that expenditure done by all the sector.
All the sectors.
Yeah. So here we know that there are basically in our economy there are only three sector: government, private investors, and or the producers and household. But if we are talking about two sector model, so in that two sector model only two things are there. First is consumers and second is producer. So the consumer is what? Consumer is household or consumption, household or private, basically household or private consumption demand. And here if we are talking about private investment demand, that means that this investment is done by the private investor. Here we are talking about private investor, not government. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So have you understood where this C plus I came from? Because we know
Yes.
that economy grow through investment among three categories of investment, namely what? Purchase of new building, addition to stock, and investment in fixed plant or machinery. The investment demand is focused on latest category, that is in machinery. So basically here we can say that the more investment is happening or more investment is the private entrepreneurs, or we can say that the private sector is doing more investment on machinery. Understood?
Yes,
Arsh?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so now here we are talking about the relationship between investment demand and rate of interest. It's called demand function. We have just discussed it. What is investment demand function? So basically investment demand here, sorry, investment, we have talked about investment multiplier, but here we have something called investment demand function. So what is investment demand function? Basically demand function is something which shows how the demand goes up and down with the relation to the other factors. As we know that demand function is something which shows the relationship of that particular variable with the other variable. So here investment demand function shows the relationship between investment demand and the rate of interest. That means that how the demand goes up and down by the changes or with the changes of the rate of interest. And so that if the rate of interest is going high, basically we are investing more, or if the rate of interest is going down, we are investing less. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there is an inverse relationship between rate of interest and investment demand. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So
इसके ऊपर बेस क्वेश्चन भी आ सकता है, right? कि like
yeah, that's why I am giving you this concept that what is investment demand function, or what is the relationship between, see, in 1 mark question, these are the only question which are going to be there. But like in 1 mark question, you don't have to explain. No, you have to pick each and every line. Wait a minute, Tarsh.
okay, ma'am.
Wait a minute.